So this Gonzaga to the Big 12 story. Now, listen, I would never on this show, I would never tell you I told you so or that we had it first. Like, we're too humble for that.
Yeah, I mean, we would never. I mean, that's kind of outside of our comfort zone.
But I do believe we have been telling you this for over a year now. And I do believe we have been telling you that Gonzaga has had an invitation to join the Big 12 for over a year now. And what's amazing is the national media has slowly and surely confirmed that. Well, not slowly and surely anymore. Reports emerged over the weekend that Gonzaga is continuing to have conversations with the Big 12. And what's amazing about it is right now, Gonzaga does not seem to have at least enough of a reason to pull the trigger and join the Big 12. And Gonzaga basketball specifically is trying to leverage the Big 12. And I think this is one of the key tipping points, is trying to leverage the Big 12 to join as a full member instead of basketball only, which is the same issue that UConn has with joining a conference. Gonzaga doesn't want to just move their basketball program into the Big 12 and leave all of their other sports behind. And yes, while it is true that Gonzaga does not play football, they have a prolific athletic department, and they want the pro rata they deserve for their entire athletic department. But here's a question that I have, and I think this has been the question now again for over a year. Why now would Gonzaga move? Why now would Gonzaga, specifically basketball, leave the WCC to join the Big 12? And I have to tell you, after talking to sources over the weekend, I just don't see that there is a reason to do it now. In 2 years, sure. In 18 months, a year, I think it's going to be a fight. I think something significant is going to have to happen. Is that the ACC situation? Is that the Super League situation? I don't know. Is that the expansion of the NCAA tournament? I don't know. Something will have to happen to move Gonzaga off their spot and push them to join the Big 12. Now, I was also told that the Big 12 really is the only league that Gonzaga is looking at. They don't view themselves as a fit in the Big 10. I think they recognize that the Big 12 is one of the power basketball leagues. And I also think this conversation around the ACC and the location of Spokane, Washington versus the footprint of the ACC makes that an untenable situation. The Big 12 is the lone P4 spot for Gonzaga basketball. And Jake, I still to this day believe it is a very good fit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that whether it's the Big 12 or their current conference, like both of those are great fits. But I think that it's so funny, in this conversation at the beginning when we first told you about this, a lot of people are like, well, they don't play football, so that's really going to hurt them, or like somehow not playing football is like going to be some big issue, and I think it's exactly the opposite. It's funny how not playing football puts them in a position where they just don't need to move quite yet. I think that Gonzaga wants to put themselves in the best position possible for as long as possible. And when you think about the tournament expanding, when you think about where the money in college athletics is going, that to me is what would move Gonzaga off the spot. Now, obviously, it goes without saying in their current situation, they're making a ton of money. Obviously, you've got pretty much a free pass into the tournament every single year. You typically make deep tournament runs. Like, you're in a really good place. But if a Super League, were to happen, or structure in college athletics were to change, that is when Gonzaga would move. And I think that, yeah, I would agree with them. They're not a Big Ten team. They're not certainly an SEC team or an ACC team. That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So to me, I think that I think that the Big 12 is the best fit, but I don't know. It feels like we're just sort of on pause. It feels like we're just waiting. We're waiting, whether it's Gonzaga, whether it's football, whether it's changing conferences, for really anybody. That sort of predicament has come to an end for now, because I feel like everything is just sort of status quo. Like, we've got the extension of the college football playoff setup. The basketball tournament is fine for now. Obviously, conversations about expanding that are happening. So there's just to his point, there is no impetus for them to move yet. But I
Right.
think Gonzaga is
Right.
one of those schools that is always looking for greener pastures, always looking for a way, to just make more money, be in a better position. And I also don't think it's lost on them that you now are in a time in college athletics where you always have to be hunting. You can never be satisfied because you never know what decision you make today, how that's going to impact you in 3 years. I really do believe that, the Pac-12 melting down put a lot of these schools on notice. Like, hey, you better be like really diligent and careful with the decisions you make now, because that could end you in 3 years, or your conference in 3 years. And you got to be really careful with that.
Well, and if I'm the Big 12, I'm doing everything I can do to shore up my stability now, because depending on what happens with the ACC, I think depending on where we wind up going with, and again, call it a super league, call it whatever you want to call it, wherever the football division is going in the NCAA, I think you're looking at a situation where if the ACC melts down, all bets are off. I mean, like this bullshit about Kansas joining the SEC.
Yeah.
Kansas is not joining the SEC out of nowhere, right? Like there was all this talk over the weekend about how, I guess it was Friday, that Kansas was going to join the SEC. There's absolutely no truth to that. That conversation is rooted in, hey, what happens if? And there's a lot of that. It is purely conjecture that Kansas would join the SEC.
But I think that's the danger in the time we're in. Like, the
Yes.
conjecture pieces turn into, like accepted facts, like in 5 minutes. And it's like, what? Like, Kansas is not a fit in the SEC right now. The only way that a team like Kansas or any of the premier brands in the Big 12 now would get into the SEC is if the conference melted down and they had nowhere else to go. It doesn't, like, I feel like people want to say, oh, well, hey, Texas and Oklahoma. Well, why not Kansas? Well, because Texas and Oklahoma are two of the biggest brands in the country.
Football brands.
And with all due respect to Kansas, you have an awesome basketball program, but your football program is not like a national power. It's a good program. It's not, I'm not saying it's crap, but it's not Texas good. It's not Oklahoma good. Like, you're not competing for national championships on the football field at Kansas. And there's a clear difference there.
Well, and Kansas, obviously, one of the most attractive parts about Kansas to anybody is that they make money. They bring people to the TV. That's attractive about Kansas. But the idea that Kansas is joining the SEC and it's a done deal is complete fabrication. Anybody telling you that has no idea what they're talking about.
Anytime you hear, oh, it's a done deal, it's probably not a done deal.
Yeah, and I look at this Gonzaga situation. It is very different. When you are Gonzaga and you have had an invitation to join the Big 12 for over a year, and you have continued those conversations, because make no mistake about this, Gonzaga has continued the conversation. The Big 12 has been in pursuit. There's no question.
I like Gonzaga.
Gonzaga has continued those conversations. They easily could have put an end to that. They did not. And they did not because I think they know the time is coming where they will need to make that move. They know that the Big 12 is where they should end up. There's not really another option for them. I look at these situations where you have these rumor mongers that frankly have never, and I agree with you when anybody says, oh, it's a done deal. It's not a done deal.
When's the last time you actually heard a story come through when someone was like, oh, hey, it's a done deal? I remember, oh, hey, they're texting us, Donovan's getting traded to the Knicks. It's a done deal.
It's not a done deal.
Actually, it's not a done deal. I remember, oh, yeah, the Pac-2 are going to get $600 million. It's a done deal. Yeah, it turns out that didn't happen either. So the idea that everyone wants to say, oh, well, Gonzaga would never go to the Big 12. There's no way. It's never going to happen.
Yet now everybody has confirmed they have an offer, and it's simply a matter of when, not if.
Yeah, because timing is everything. And I feel like this is lost on people. Just because the two parties haven't formalized an agreement yet doesn't mean that there's not an understood agreement when the time comes. If you think that people aren't planning 3 to 5 years in advance, you're out of your mind. And all the conversations happening today are about 3 to 5 years into the future, because that's all this game is about. It's ensuring your future.
But I also think there has to be another significant shift to get people off their spot. You're not going to get, again, if you want to talk about Kansas to the SEC, you're not going to get Kansas to the SEC just out of the blue, nowhere.
Just for no reason.
It's going to have to, if the ACC melts down, that is a basketball conference. If the ACC melts down, you are going to have residual unintended consequences of that. And the bigger question is, if the ACC melts down, does the Big 12 survive? Because I am certain that is not 100%, that is not a given. If the ACC melts down, there is going to be incredible instability if you are not the Big 10 and if you are not the SEC.
Oh, and I think if the ACC melts down, that the Super League thing is going to get pushed forward for obvious reasons at that point. And then, the real question is, okay, if the Big 12 gets eliminated as we know it today, what is, Brett Yormark's role in pushing, what were his schools forward? Because that's the thing that I think is really interesting when you look at, the SEC and the Big 10 running things. Like, you look at, ACC leadership, folks like Brett Yormark, like what is their role in college athletics moving forward? Because we've talked all about, like, hey, college basketball at some point is going to need their own commissioner. Like, college football kind of has their own commissioner in Greg Sankey, but it's not obviously formalized. So it's just, I'm telling you, all this stuff is fluid. And this Gonzaga to the Big 12 conversation is the perfect example of it. Like, they're both on the same page. They both agree it's a good fit. There just needs to be something that pushes the ball forward.
Well, and I think you also have to understand who you're talking to. Like, for us, and I say this all the time, and I think we get questioned about, who we talk to, or who are your sources, fat ass.
Monty, can you tell me your sources in DM, bro?
When do we ever talk off the top of our head? When do we have opinions that are not based on what power players in college sports have told us? Never. It's the same thing in the NBA. You don't talk about stuff until you know. And I can tell you the reason we were so far ahead on Gonzaga is because we knew. Because we talked to people who know. We talked to people making the decisions. And I can tell you that there is no substance to Kansas leaving the Big 12 on a random Tuesday in, May of 2024. There's just no reason for them to. Do you guys understand that they are in a very influential position in the conference? Gonzaga is not. They are in a place where they are making really good money, and they have a very clear path to make really good money. So they can get into the college football playoff, and it's realistic for Kansas football to get into the college football playoff as a member of the Big 12, which is really nowadays the only way for you to make top money in this game. If you're in college basketball, who has a greater position than Kansas in the Big 12? Does Kansas joining what is an emerging, I think clearly growing SEC basketball product, does that help them in the current incarnation of the NCAA tournament? It certainly does not. It certainly does not. You'd be stepping back to a lesser basketball conference. So it doesn't help you in football, and it doesn't help your profile in basketball. Why would you do that now? And this is the thing that I continue to ask you. Use some common sense. Don't send me 1,000 DMs saying Kansas is leaving for the SEC.
Via social media.
Be smarter than that. There's no reason for them to do that. Now, you want to talk about Gonzaga in comparison to Kansas? There's all kinds of reason for Gonzaga basketball to join the Big 12. And the bigger question is, what is Brett Yormark and his constituency in the Big 12 willing to give up to get Gonzaga to join the conference? That's the bigger question. And the answer is, I think, unknown. I don't think anybody has a clear idea of what Brett Yormark has offered to Gonzaga. and what Gonzaga has countered to Brett Yormark.
And I think that offering changes as time goes on.
I think it does.
I think that the offering, the offering is only as good as the current marketplace and the current conditions. And I think that again, there's so much change happening in college football. I would be surprised if there was like a way over the top offer from Brett Yormark based on the fact that the conferences and its member institutions are going to have to pay out on these lawsuits that are taking place. So they're not going to want to take less revenue from the TV partners. Obviously the NIL situation is costing more and more money. And I think that's the hard sell is like, yeah, get the brand Gonzaga. Obviously you want them in the Big 12, but you have to be able to make the money on it work properly. And I think that,
but wait. That goes exactly back to why Texas and Oklahoma were such an easy move to the SEC.
Yeah.
Is the SEC a better football product than the Big 12? No question about it.
Yeah.
No question about it. Does moving Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC raise their profiles and make them more money? No question about it. There's just no argument.
Yeah.
Those are football blue bloods who want to compete at the very highest level. The Big 12 does not allow you to compete at the very highest level, in my opinion, in football. It doesn't. We've talked about this. There's not especially with Texas and Oklahoma gone, there is not a brand in the Big 12 football. It is, and again, I just reiterate, it's why it is so crippling that Baylor is not good, that Oklahoma State does not compete at the top of college football on a regular basis. It's absolutely crippling that Joey McGuire and Texas Tech were an absolute unquestionable disappointment last year.
And I think the Big 12 has progress to make in the tournament. I love the attendance they had into the tournament. Obviously had a bunch of spots, but to get shellacked the way you got shellacked in the tournament wasn't ideal. And that's why I say, like, again, I think they're in agreement. They would love to do business together. Like Gonzaga's a good fit, but I think that, the conference is in a place where they have to ensure that their current level of financial stability stays in place until they know, okay, hey, we're going to head to the Super League model, or we're going to head this way or head that way. Cause that's the big thing right now. I'm telling you, there is a ton of uncertainty about where the sport is going. Like, where is college football going? Where is the tournament going? Because ultimately, the reality is where college football goes, that kind of decides just how aggressively you would expand the tournament. Because if football is in a really good place and you're making money in that area, that's going to obviously allow you more flexibility in basketball. It's going to allow Brett Yormark and company to say, okay, cool, we're comfortable, maybe paying over market value on an annual basis for Gonzaga. We're comfortable, because if Gonzaga's asking for, let's call it $17 million a year, let's say, not a full share, but a 75% share. Maybe the conference isn't comfortable with that right now. Maybe the conference is only comfortable with a half share, and they're still leaning on them about not having football. Who the hell knows? But that's kind of the point.
I also go back to the fact that college football is becoming exclusive, not inclusive. You are pushing more universities out of the college football playoff. And everybody's like, well, Monty, how's that possible? They're expanding. If you really think that we're going to be at 12, I would be shocked if a year from now we were not expanding the college football playoff on a P4 level. You are pushing the G5s out. You are in, whether you like it or not, it is what it is. That's where this is going. And I think there's so many ingredients right now, lawsuits, whatever you want to point to. There's no question that the college football playoff, we're winning a championship in college football and earning top dollar is more and more exclusive. Again, I just go back to, why did Texas and Oklahoma move? Because it gave them the opportunity to make more money. That includes a higher fee per school in the SEC. It includes more opportunity to win at the highest levels and guarantee yourself better positioning. The great Notre Dame question: what does the longer road mean for Notre Dame in the college football playoff? I don't know. It's yet to be determined. We'll find that out. But for Texas and Oklahoma, the equation is very clear. Win your conference or be one of the top 12 teams, and you are in. If you are Kansas, if you go to the SEC, your chances of ever going to the college football playoff, going to the college football playoff in the next 2 years, let's say you move today. Are you a college football playoff contender? Not in the SEC, you're not. No, you're not. And Kansas football has done some amazing shit over the last couple of years. I don't think any of us question that.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go ahead and say that beating BYU is a lot easier than beating Ole Miss.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kansas in their best year is probably a like in the current format, the expanded format. I think it's probably anywhere between a 12 seed and a 20 seed, right? Like you're a fringe team that's in, or you're just kind of a top 20 team. That's their range, in my opinion. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that the problem is that, again, you're not good enough to be in every year. So that inherently means that you are not good enough to be in the SEC.
How's that gone for Missouri? Yeah. How's that gone for Texas A&M?
I was gonna say, I think Missouri is a really good comp. I think that those two schools are pretty level.
Nebraska. How's that gone? How's the Big Ten? How's that Big Ten bread gone for Nebraska?
Yeah,
not well.
Yeah, I mean, think about how Kansas is doing in the Big Ten.
How did Colorado do? And how did Colorado do in the Pac-12? Irrelevant until Prime showed up. Like, you look at the schools that move. It is very difficult to ascend. Look how long it took Kyle Whittingham at Utah to ascend to the top of the Pac-12. A long time.
Yeah.
And again, I can't find somebody to tell me that Kansas is going to the SEC.
Yeah. Well, it just doesn't make sense.
Can't find, and you hear all these people just running away. Oh, Kansas. The only way, and I think this is the last thing I'll say about this until there is an update. The only way Kansas to the SEC happens is if there is significant change systematically in college sports. The ACC melts down. The Super League happens. Whatever you want to point to. Because the NCAA tournament expanding does not move Kansas. Kansas is a powerhouse in college basketball. That will not move their conference. That will only help Kansas, will not hurt Kansas. The SEC, I don't see an avenue for the SEC to land Kansas as a one-off. That's beyond the fact that would be very difficult for Kansas to justify that move. There's just no reason for them to rock the boat right now.
No.
You have some questions about Bill Self's long-term viability as a basketball coach, health-wise. He always seems to be right on the line, rule-wise. I think Kansas, who spent a lot of money on facilities, remember, I think Kansas wants some glass, calm water. They want smooth sailing for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
Would be how I would put it. And I think it's hyperbole. Nobody of note is reporting that Kansas is going to the SEC. Nobody. So be that as it may. What I would tell you is this Gonzaga story has real legs now, because finally we're not the only ones reporting it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go back on the channel. I know that everybody, no shit, Monty. Okay, go back on the channel. What is that? 12, 16, 18 months ago?
All you got to do is search it on the channel, man.
It's been here forever. And people found it over the weekend. I saw all the comments on our Gonzaga videos. People found them. Knock yourself out. I think it is what it is.
Yeah.
So let's get to the comment section. Good morning to you. Again, thank you, everybody that is here. Without you guys, we could not do this show every day. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that all of you are sending me your prize picks now, which I love. I would just like to thank Rory McIlroy for those 2 eagles on the par 5s yesterday to make Jaboy a
Ja
$56 winner yesterday on Prize Picks. Back on the heater now. 3 in a row. 3 in a row. Back on the heater. And I can only tell you, as I open up my Prize Picks app, download the Prize Picks app, use the promo code Monty
Hey, Monty.
to get 100% deposit matching, prizepicks.com. I never thought these next words would come out of my mouth. Thank you, Luka Doncic.
Hey, Luka.
Because my Saturday Prize Picks were very much up in the air. And Luka Doncic on Saturday had 15 rebounds. 15 rebounds and 8 dimes. Or excuse me, 5 dimes.
Yeah.
So when you put up 42, and I just think that it is so rewarding deep into my bosoms.
Stay hard.
That I can't even accurately tell you in an oratorial fashion. I don't know. It felt really good that he was 41 and a half and I took more and he got 42. I just would like people to,
I'd be excited.
Yeah.
I
would like people. Now, then there is Josh Giddey, who still is rocking the under 15 vibe. He had 9 points. Thank you for that. My guy
Doesn't
Chet.
make you feel responsible.
My guy Chet let me down on Saturday night. I needed 24 and a half. So I needed him to have 25. And he had 24. Prick.